Oh, Courtney just told me I was muted. I apologize for that. I had such a hard time getting the recording started that I forgot to unmute myself. So I'll start over. Welcome to the next installment of our Evergreen Basics webinars. This one will be covering searching the catalog. And today we're going to be looking at setting preferences to impact the way that your search functions, selecting search terms, and kind of how those search terms work to bring back results, using filters, sorting your results and working with those results once you have them, and using facets to take an initial search and sort of build on it. And the most of what we're going to be talking about today is within the context of the staff client catalog search. A lot of these uh, a lot of these functions also show up in the OPAC search, so a lot of it is transferable. We will do um, an OPAC specific session at some point in the future where we'll kind of look at all of the different ways that your patrons can use the OPAC. And we'll revisit searching in that context at that time. But if you do have questions about searching in the OPAC, feel free to bring them up today. Like I said, a lot of what we're talking about in terms of the staff catalog really is going to be transferable to the OPAC. So if your questions are more about searching in the OPAC, feel free to ask those and we can take a look at those as time allows. And if we end up finishing a little bit early, we can take a quick look at the OPAC as well. But let's go ahead and dive in. And just a note that if you do have any questions, feel free to just go ahead and put those in the chat and I'll try to get to them as we go. And if I don't manage to do it in real time, then we'll definitely get to them at the end. So let's talk about setting up your search preferences. The version of Evergreen that you have direct access to allows you to essentially search everything that NC Cardinal has, which means any item owned throughout the consortium will come up in a search. You can impact this a little bit by setting up specific preferences. And these preferences are typically saved to your workstation, which means that if you have them set on, the workstation where you log in for circulation duties when you're at the desk, you can have them set one way for that. And then if you have a different computer you use, as a cataloger or something like that, you can actually set different search preferences on that computer. So you can divide up how you have your search set up depending on the work that you're doing. And you can also change them at any time. The main things that you can change in your setting preferences are the default search library, the preferred library, the default search pane, the search results per page, and the option to exclude electronic resources. So we'll talk about each of these. The first thing to note when talking about setting preferences is that there are two places where you can set preferences. From the workstation administration interface, you can set the three preferences of default library, preferred library, and default pane. So I'll show you how you do that. If you are in Evergreen and you come up here to administration and workstation, then these three options here, default search library, preferred library, and advanced search default pane, this is where you can set these at the workstation level. So you don't have to do it from here. There is a way that you can set these directly from the catalog search interface. But if you have sort of a standard set of things that you want to use on your computer, or if you have a department where you'd like everyone searching the same way, you can set up a workstation, like a shared workstation, to allow the same settings here across the board. So to change your default search library, you would just select the system or branch that you want that set at here. So let's go ahead and just for the sake of this demonstration, let's set this at a system level. And then your preferred library. And we'll talk about what these mean in just a moment. And so we'll set this at a branch level. And then your advanced default search pane, you can choose between the advanced search, the numeric search, and the mark expert search. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that at numeric. After I've set this, I do need to log out in order for those settings to take effect. But then when I log back in and I navigate to my catalog search, you can see up here in my scoping that I've automatically been set to Alexander. and that it pumped me into the numeric search to begin with. So instead of going into the keyword or advanced search to start with, it's taken me directly into that numeric search. So let's talk a little bit about what each of those things mean. And then we'll come back and talk about the other two things that you can do from the search interface directly. The default search library determines what library is searched from the advanced search screen and the portal page by default. You can override this setting when you're actually searching by selecting a different library. So when we're looking at the staff catalog and we see up here this box in the top right, this is basically where my search is taking place. So if you think of all of the items throughout NC Cardinal as a giant kind of pool of items that are divided out by library, I can look at the entire pool by having this set to Cardinal. Or I can look for just those items that are held in different libraries by choosing from the list below. Now, there are two levels of choice that you can make here. So you can choose your system. So if you are in a multi-branch system, that means you'd be choosing to look at all of your branches at once. Whereas if you are in a single branch system, then choosing your system or branch will make no difference. If you're in a multi-branch system, then going down to the branch level allows you to focus that search just on the items that are held at your library, so your physical location. And so if you think about kind of what your needs are when it comes to searching the catalog, that can kind of help you determine how you'd like to scope this and what you'd like to set as your default. So, if your primary use of the catalog is to help a patron who's asking if you specifically have an item in your library, you probably want to start by setting this to your specific branch. Whereas if you're primarily using the catalog search to help people find things available through resource sharing, then you probably want to be at all of Cardinal so that you can see what everyone else has in addition to your materials. So the scope that you choose is really based on what you're trying to do with your catalog search. And of course, you can change the scope as you need to. So even if I start, let me come back here at Alexander, which is set as my default currently, I can decide I'd actually like to see everything throughout NC Cardinal and change it to Cardinal as I'm doing my search. So if I have a patron come up to the desk and say, do you have any copies of this book available? I can start my search at my branch, conduct my search, and let them know what our availability is. And if it turns out that we don't actually have, so for example, at Alexander, Maine, the copy of the book that I'm looking for is in a lost status, so it's not available to check out. So I could say, let me see if there's anything else in the rest of my system. And I can change my scoping and redo the same search. And so now I can see, so ours is lost, but there is one available at Stony Point. They could either go over there and check it out themselves, or we could bring it in for them, and we'll have it in a couple of days. If we saw that everything throughout the system was unavailable, then I could go ahead and change my scoping up to Cardinal and see what's available throughout the rest of the consortium and what we might be able to bring in via resource sharing. And so you'll see that there are quite a lot of copies available if we do that. So that is your default search library. And if you change that, if you set that in your preferences, it doesn't mean that you're stuck only searching that. You can always change it as you need to, but that's where it's going to start you every time. Now, your preferred library is a little bit trickier. Your preferred library is used to show copies regardless of the library searched. So we typically recommend that you set this to your home library, meaning your branch, so that local copies show up first in search results. However, in practice, there are actually three things to keep in mind about your preferred library. First, if your library owns a copy of a title, when you search for that title while scoped to Cardinal, your copies will be listed first in the shelving location call number grid. So in this search here that's set to all of Cardinal, I've got Alexander, Maine set as my preferred library. And as I scroll down to this copy here, that this is the first one in my search results that actually has an Alexander, Maine holding for it. I see that that's listed first, and I probably should have chosen a library that's further along in the alphabet so you could really see that it's not coming up alphabetically, it's prioritizing my preferred library's copies. So that's great. That's really useful if I'm trying to help a patron find materials, because I can tell them right off the bat, we do have a copy, but it's currently lost. But there are a lot of other copies throughout the consortium. So I can see right away within this very large list what my library's holdings are. So setting your preferred library to your local branch can make a lot of sense because it is going to prioritize those copies. The other thing to be aware of is that if I go into this this item table, then I see, once again, Alexander has been moved to the top of the item table, meaning that once I'm in the bib record, I'm able to continue to prioritize my copies. And this is really useful with a title such as this one, where there are so many copies in the consortium, because it really lets me see mine front and center. However, the third thing to keep in mind is that this can cause a minor problem, because if I am scoped to the same branch I have set as my preferred library, only my copies are going to show up in this item status table. So let's come back into our search and change it to only look at Alexander, Maine, which is where my preferred library is currently set. When I conduct this search, the search itself goes through normally. I'm seeing my copy prioritized, but I'm not seeing anything else. So remember a moment ago when we looked at this, there were like 9 other copies listed here in the results page. Now I'm only seeing one. And if I go into the bib record, that's still the case. I'm only seeing my copies. So that can be a little bit frustrating if you start out locally, but then want to see what else is out there. You have to redo your search. It's not a huge deal, one at a time, but if you're doing this kind of over and over again, it can get a little annoying. I will let you know that we do have a wish list item out for the Evergreen developers community to have some way to, click a button or something like that to show all available copies from this item status screen. So hopefully that's something that's fixed in the future. But if not, and until then, just be aware that if you do set your scope to the same library where your preferred library is set, then you are going to limit your item status view just in this item table in the bib record. Otherwise, everything else is pretty much functionally the same, but you do have that limited view of other libraries' holdings. So just something to be aware of. So the way that you set up your default and preferred libraries is really your choice and should be based on what you have to do. Like, why are you searching the catalog? Think about what the main reason you search the catalog is and what your goals are with those searches, and set your preferences based on that. And you can always go in and change them. So, just because you try it once doesn't mean you're locked in forever. So you can kind of experiment. Now, I mentioned that there were 2 ways to set preferences, and the first one was, of course, under Workstation Administration, but the second one is here under this Search Preferences option in the search page. So currently we are in a bib record. We still have our search form up here at the top, but I'm going to move back into searching the catalog so that you can really see where this is. So it's here in the far right side of the search pane at the top. And if I click on that, then it opens up some options, and you'll see that the first 3 are the same ones that we looked at before: default search library, preferred library, and default search pane. So I don't need to go back into Workstation Administration to reset these. I can reset them directly from here. So let's say that I wanted to actually make my default search library local, but take my preferred library back up to Cardinal. I can do that right here. The other things that I can do from this uh, preferences interface is I can also choose how many search results I see per page, and I can turn on the option to exclude electronic resources. So those are the last 2 options here. They were not available as part of Workstation Administration. They're only available through the search preferences settings here in the search interface. So one thing I can do is I can take my search results per page and I can change them to a different number. I'd recommend not going too high with these. I know none of us like scrolling through page after page of search results, but the more numbers that you have in your search results, the longer it's going to take to load. So generally speaking, I think 50 is really pushing the boundary of how long I'm willing to let it load. So I definitely suggest looking at something under 50, but that's really also personal preference. So think about what you're looking for in terms of loading. And if your concern is that you don't like clicking through pages, but you don't mind loading, then maybe you set it higher. If you'd rather have very quick results and you don't mind clicking through, you can set it lower. You can set it all the way down to just one. I don't know why you'd want to, but you certainly can. And then when you do a search, um, even though there are 9 results, only one's showing up on this page. And then I have to click through each individual one, which, to a certain extent, that does help you to focus on each line in and of itself. So again, this is your preference and how you'd like the search to function. I'm going to take this away from one though, because that's going to drive me a little bananas. And then the other one is exclude electronic resources. Now, I would recommend that you keep this checked all the time. Checking this box in preferences will not automatically exclude electronic resources. What this will do is give you this checkbox up here at the top so that you can choose to exclude electronic resources each time you do a search. So actually, if I uncheck this box, you'll see that I don't have that option in my search form anymore. In order to get that option in the search form, you have to check it in your preferences. And once that's done, this option will always be here. So you can, let's take this up to a slightly bigger search. And you can kind of see that in action. If I search for this throughout all of Cardinal, I get 270 results. If I turn off exclude electronic resources, then I'm down, well, 269. It actually wasn't that big a difference in this case. In other titles, it may be a bigger difference. And so this is something to keep in mind, even if your library has already made it your practice that you simply don't catalog your e-resources in a way that makes them show up in the search. Then you still, if you're going to be doing wider searches, you're still going to want to turn this on, because once you're searching outside your system, there are other libraries that do include their electronic resources as part of their Evergreen holdings. And as a result, those are going to come into your results. So you're going to want to turn this off most of the time. At the very least, you're going to want to make sure that this option is there so that you can turn it off. And we'll see some searches throughout the day today where e-resources are kind of being prioritized in your results. And so it will make sense to turn those off. So that is the primary stuff that you'll want to set within your preferences. And like I said, you can change this as much as you want. So if you try a setup and you really don't like it, it's not working for you, you find that you're constantly going in and changing it, you can always try a different combination of, default and preferred, and a different number of results per page. Just play around with it until you find what works for you. You do have a lot of flexibility to be able to do that. And there's sticky settings. So once you've set them, those are going to continue to be set for you until you manually change them. Any questions about search preferences? Right, well, we're going to go on and talk about selecting search terms and how the search terms are actually functioning when you conduct a search. But if you do have questions about preferences, feel free to put those in the chat and we can always come back to them as we go along. So when talking about search terms, we're going to talk about 2 aspects of it. We're going to talk about limiters, and then we'll also we'll talk about one aspect of it, which is the individual limiters that you have. And then we'll do a demonstration of how these limiters impact your searches. And I did see a question in the chat. The search setup in workstation, so it will not convey over to other workstations. Does it change other users on that workstation, or is it only the user who sets those preferences? So When you do the workstation admin version of it, it is definitely by workstation and it will impact anyone who logs into that workstation. So, if your preferences aren't the same as somebody else who logs into the same workstation, that could be a problem. Just to be clear, when I'm talking about workstation, I am talking about this up here in the top right. Um, not necessarily the computer you're on. So if you share a computer with somebody, but you each log into your own individual workstation on that computer, then your preferences are not going to cross over. But if you're using the same workstation, so if everyone's on, Cert Computer 1 as your workstation, then those preferences are going to cross over. I'll be honest, I actually have not tested the search preferences as you set them here, whether or not those carry over via workstation or account. So I'll experiment with that, and I'll put something in Basecamp about what I find with that, because I don't know, unless somebody happens to know and they can put it in the chat. So yeah, that is something to keep in mind, is that if you do share workstations with people, you may find yourself having to reset preferences quite a lot. We have another thing in the chat saying that you can search by branch, system, or consortium. Is there an option to search multiple systems without searching the whole consortium? At this time, no, there's not. It's basically, it's your library, your branch within your library, your system of branches, or all of NC Cardinal. I know that there are other libraries that use Evergreen who have things set up differently, but we are not exploring that option at this time. Something to keep in mind, and if that's something that you feel would be useful for you, certainly send us that feedback, and we will take it into consideration as we look at future projects. But at this time, that's not an option, unfortunately. And the same with searching only one or two branches, or only 2 or 3 branches within your system. It's either one branch, whole system, or whole consortium. So not a ton of nuance there, but. All right. Any other questions related to setting up search preferences? Well, let's go on and start talking a little bit about search terms. So when you are conducting a basic search in Evergreen, which the misnomer, of course, is that the basic search in Evergreen is also the advanced search. But this search type basically involves setting the format that you're searching for, the field that you're searching for your search terms in, determining how those search terms will be matched against existing MARC records, and then the search term itself. So in this case, these searches that I've been doing have been incredibly basic. I have not limited my format at all. I'm looking across all formats. I'm looking in for this as a keyword. Generally speaking, when we're talking about the catalog field, we're talking about the field in the MARC record that Evergreen will check for your search term. So, when you're searching for the title, you're going to be searching the 245 and a couple of other fields where the title appears. And this does mean that, if there is a title in translation, both the English and the other language search could be successful. It does mean that, subtitles will be successful. So it searches multiple fields that are all contained underneath sort of a title umbrella. Same with author. It's going to search that 100 field, but it's also going to search other fields that may include information about an author. So you might sometimes be able to search essentially by translator, or if we're talking about movies or other sort of AV materials, you may be able to search by both director and actors that are in the movie. So the author field also searches in a variety of different MARC fields that are all related to the author. The keyword field does not search the entire MARC record. It searches 6 or 7, I want to say, different fields within the MARC record. So it's going to be looking at the description. It's going to be looking at the subject terms. It's going to be looking at the title fields. Basically anything that is kind of descriptive of what the material contains. Those are the fields that are going to be contained within this search. So it's pretty broad, but it's not, the entire record. So just something to be aware of when you're doing that keyword search. What are you actually doing when you select a keyword? For this particular search, I just stuck with keyword. And for my matching, all I said was contains, and that's your default. This just means it's going to look for this term anywhere within any of the fields it searches for keyword, and it's not going to limit by format. Now, I could make this a little bit more specific. So one way you can do that is by choosing contains phrase. So if I put in, let's try a different search. If I put in witching tide and I have it as contains, then I'm basically looking for the word witching and the word tide anywhere in the fields that that keyword search is going to search for. Whereas if I chose to make this contains phrase, then I'm really looking for those two words next to each other. So it allows you to get just a little bit more specific. Now, typically speaking, because of the way the relevance works with this search engine, if the words are next to each other, they'll be prioritized in your results over a record where the words are separate from one another. So just keep that in mind, that it's not always necessary to kind of make your matching more specific, but it is an option, and that's especially useful if you have very, very common words. And they may show up in, hundreds or thousands of different records. It's just one way to make your search a little bit narrower and more specific. So we talked about format briefly, but basically this allows you to choose the type of item. Now, if we look at our format dropdown here, you'll notice that you have a couple of different things. Books is just all books. Whereas if you're looking for movies, you have to specifically choose 4K Blu-ray, DVD. I think you've got VHS down here as well. And so that can be useful because you may have a patron who comes up and says that they're looking for a specific movie and they only have a DVD player. They cannot play a Blu-ray. So it's useful to be able to limit in that way. But on the other hand, if you have a patron who comes up and says, I just want this movie, I can play any format that you have, then, that makes it a little trickier. And we'll talk about how to deal with that in a moment. But just keep in mind that the formats essentially match with the format icon that is available in the record. So let's take a look at how all of these different fields kind of impact your search. So I'm going to start with a very, very broad search. I'm going to search all of Cardinal. I'm going to choose all formats. I'm doing just a keyword search. I'm going to just do a regular contain search, the most basic version of matching. And I'm going to go with a fairly specific or a fairly common word as my search term. So I'm going to look for the women. And when I do this search, I am searching all of Cardinal, and I'm searching pretty much the whole MARC record for the words the women. Anywhere in the record. They don't even have to be next to each other. And the thing that I'm looking for could be in any format. So this is going to be a pretty big search. I'm going to get a pretty large set of results is my guess. Given the time it's taking to load, I would say that guess is pretty accurate. No, I did exclude electronic resources. I actually didn't mean to. So I'm going to turn that off, although I think it's already probably too late. Yep, so I got 10,000 results. What that means is I probably got more than 10,000 results because Evergreen will cap your results at 10,000, which means if there are more than 10,000 records that could meet your search terms, you only get the first 10,000 of them. So this was a really, really broad search. And I can see right off the bat that I'm not getting what I want up front. I'm going to have to scroll through a lot of results possibly in order to find it. So rather than doing that, I'm going to see if I can make my search just a little bit more targeted. The first thing I'm going to do is say, well, the first thing I see here is a DVD. I don't want a DVD. I'm looking for the book, The Women. So I'm going to change my formats to all books. And let's redo this search. Again, it's taking a while, so it's still a pretty big search, but at this point now I am still looking for the women in any order within almost any field within the MARC record. The only difference is that now I am looking specifically for items that are books. So DVDs, Blu-rays, that type of thing are not going to show up in this search. But it's still a pretty big search, still pretty broad. And I still got more than 10,000 results. Now I know because the first one we saw before was a DVD and we're not seeing that anymore. I know that changing my format did limit that. That tells you just how big a search this is, that I'm still hitting that cap of 10,000. So I need to do more to make this search targeted. So the next thing I can do is, let's say I want to change my search field. So before I was searching keyword. So I was searching several different spots within the MARC record, some of which contain quite a lot of information. Let's limit this down to just those fields that are associated with the title, because what I'm really looking for is the book with the title, The Women. So if I redo this search as a title search, let's see if it went a lot faster, and I'm down to 6,822. So still a lot, but better than we were getting. We're no longer hitting that cap. I can tell you right off the bat that I did get the thing I was looking for. It was the number one thing here. So I could just stop here and I could say, this is what I was looking for. I don't need to do anything further. But I want to see what happens and if I can get this number down even further with a few more tweaks. So the next thing I'm going to do is my matching field. I'm actually going to say, let's look for things that start with the women. So I could do the phrase, and that's going to limit a bit. Starts with will limit even further. Not only will it be looking for the specific phrase, the women, those words next to each other in that order, but they have to be the first two words in at least one of the title fields in the MARC record. So let's switch it to that and see what that does. And yeah, we're down to 739. So that made a huge difference. So we went to over 6,000 to under 800. So really, really big difference. Still finding exactly what I'm looking for right here on top, which is great. Let's make it a little bit more specific though and see if we can target it even further. The way we're going to do this is we're going to add a new search term. So right now, when I came into my keyword search form, I had one line for adding search terms. So I could add one search term and I could determine where I was looking for it, how I was looking for it, and the format. If I click this plus sign, then I can add a new term. Now I can't change the format. I'm only looking for one format at a time. But I can set another catalog field for my second search term. So let's look for author this time. I can choose matching. So, and I can just do contains, or I can try to make it more specific. For now, I'm just going to do a regular contain search. We'll see where we go. And I'm just going to put in the author's last name. We'll redo this search and we're down to 7. So that made a really, really big difference. And I'm still seeing what I want right on top. So there's really no need to go further, but I'm going to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the search terms and I'm going to put in the author's first name as well. Now, it is not necessary when doing an author search to go last name, comma, first name. However, that can be useful. Like I said, when you're doing an author search, you're searching through any MARC record, any MARC tag that is connected to an author. Some of those, of course, are going to be first name, last name in terms of their format, and some of them will be opposite. So you can choose either way. And I'm down to 2 results. So I got the book that I wanted and oh, I must still be set to 1 result per page. I got the book that I wanted and the large print book that I wanted. So I was able to go from over 10,000 to specifically 2 by just making some changes to my search. So your keyword search is also called the advanced search, and it does allow you to get very advanced. You can start very basic, but you can get very advanced if you need to. We do have millions of records throughout NC Cardinal, so it is, if you're going to be searching all of Cardinal, it is a good idea to at least think through how you might target your search a little bit better before just jumping in. You can often find what you're looking for with just, a keyword search and doing nothing to make it more specific because Evergreen is searching or sorting things by default by relevance. So it's going to choose the thing that it thinks you want. And often that's going to be the case, but not always. And so definitely worth thinking about how can I make my search a little bit more targeted. Now you can add multiple search terms. I would recommend 3 as your limit for that. Though once you get beyond 3, it's a little bit too hard on Evergreen and it tends to kind of choke on those results. So you might not actually get results. And even when you do, sometimes they start to get a little wonky. So I would say 3 should be your limit. And usually you can find what you're looking for with 2. But 3 is certainly, you can go up to 3 if you need to. So that is the process of actually conducting a search, choosing keyword or choosing search terms, and determining how you're going to have the catalog actually search for these materials. Are there any questions about that process? All right, well, let's go on. And if you do have questions about the actual search process, please feel free to put them in. We can always revisit, and we'll continue to search throughout the rest of this webinar as well. So you'll see some more things in action too. The next thing we're going to talk about is adding filters. So filters basically allow you to take the keyword searches or title and author searches that you're doing and make them even more specific. There are a number of filters available. We'll talk a little bit about what Evergreen's doing when you're applying filters, and we'll talk about which filters are actually useful because not all of them are. So adding filters is fairly easy once you know it's there. You click the 3-dot menu to the right of the top search field, and then you'll see, I think 8 categories pop up. You choose the category you want to filter on, and then you decide what that filter will be, and then you click search. So if we're in my search, and let's start over because I don't want to go from that search for the women there. So I can fill in the search terms that I'm going to use, and I can determine how I want to search for it. And then I can click this little menu here to the right of the plus and minus sign, and that's going to pull up additional filters that I can add. So these filters basically look at different parts of the MARC record, primarily in the leader fields. And it uses how those leader fields are coded to filter the results. Now, you don't have to know a ton about cataloging to make these work, but it's important to understand where it's coming from so you understand why they don't always work the way the way you expect them to. So let's talk about what the filters are. The first one is item type. This is pulled from the O6 leader field in the MARC record. And if we look at the item type filter here, it's the top left one. You can see that it's actually really similar to our formats list. But when our formats list has things like all books and then the different movie types broken out, within the item type, I can choose just book or I can choose just video. So, if you have a patron who comes up and says, I'm looking for Game of Thrones, I want the movie or the TV show, I don't care if it's Blu-ray or DVD. You can do that here by using item type rather than the format list, which makes you select a specific movie format. So this allows you to sort of more broadly encompass the different formats that are available. And that's the thing that item type is best for, video and also audiobook, because if you look at the format list here, you can see that we have a CD audiobook, a cassette audiobook, and somewhere down here, preloaded audio. So that's like playaways and things. So if your patron just wants the audiobook and they don't care about the format of it, then rather than selecting a specific format from this list, you can come down here and choose audiobook, and then it'll pull up anything in any of those formats. So if we attempted this search looking for audiobooks across the board, oh, nothing was found because I'm at Alexander, Maine. I want to be a Cardinal. I only get two. They're both CD audiobooks. Let's do something a little bit broader. Yep. So for this one, I get CD audiobook. I get a preloaded and play away. Another CD audiobook. Probably not going to get a cassette audiobook, though I did see one earlier this week. But I start to get things in different formats, but that are still under that audiobook record. Same thing if I do video. Um, if I search for Batman with the video item type, then I get DVDs, VHS. Wow. Couple of VHSs. I guess there's going to be a Blu-ray in here somewhere. Yep, and here's a Blu-ray. So I get multiple different formats within that umbrella of video. So the item type one is actually pretty useful because it does allow you to kind of do broader item types than the format list allows, while still limiting a little bit. Now the next one is the item form. This is pulled from the '08 liter field in the MARC record. So this indicates kind of the container. And if we look at it, we can see that what that means is that if you're looking for Braille books, if you're looking for large print, this is really useful. Outside of those two specific forms, this particular filter is not very useful for most patrons and most libraries. Now in, GHL or another kind of special library, some of these might be more useful. If you're looking for local history or genealogy materials, microfilm could be a form that you're specifically looking for. So you can definitely use the other ones in here, but the two that are most useful are large print. And then to a lesser extent, but we still do have materials throughout NC Cardinal in this form, and that's Braille. Large print is the one that I think probably gets the most use here though, because if you notice our format up here does not, oh, it does have large print book. So you can use that as well. But the item type does not have large print book. So this does allow you to kind of add that additional filter if you needed to. All right, the next one is language. So this is just the language that's identified in the MARC record. And you can see here that we have quite a large number of languages available. We're not going to have something in all of these, but we do have a lot of libraries with fairly large foreign language materials. So let's see. It's a very, very large list. It's looking for Mandarin, but I think it must just be under Chinese. Yeah, here we go. So I could do my search looking for Batman specifically in Chinese. And apparently we don't have anything. Let's Here we go. Let's try it in Spanish. Yep, so we got 99 results in Spanish. So it's possible to come in and find foreign language materials using the language limiter. So if you have a patron who's looking for things specifically in other languages, I'll let you know that for movies, if they have multiple language options on a single disc, so you can go in and actually choose which language you'd like to have it dubbed into, um, they're all going to show up on here. So this Batman is probably the regular English language Batman, but the patron would have the opportunity to choose to watch it in Spanish and probably a few other languages as well. So keep that in mind as you're doing these searches. But language, uh, there are materials in other languages that are available. Now, the next field is audience. This is identified in the O8 leader field in the MARC record. And what I will tell you is that it's not super useful. You can look at the list of audiences and you can see that other than kind of general or juvenile, they're not, or adult and juvenile, they're not particularly useful. You've got very, very few here. So you can basically do YA, you can do adult, and you can do juvenile. And within that, it has to do with how good the catalog records are as well as to whether or not something's going to come up with this filter applied. I would probably recommend when trying to filter for a specific audience rather than filtering by audience, you filter by shelving location. You come down and choose all of the juvenile shelving locations, for example. And that's going to be a little bit more targeted, but you can definitely try the audience one. I have not consistently had great luck with it. I do sometimes have luck with it, but it is not consistent. So just kind of a caveat with that one. The next one is video format. So we did talk about how item type allows you to look at all video types, and format forces you to choose 4K, Blu-ray, or DVD. Video format lets you go further. And so this is where you can come in and look for really highly specific, fairly obsolete formats. Not super useful for most patrons, but if you have a situation where you're doing, local history or special collections or something like that, this is where that can come in handy. You may have some things in those collections that are, for example, on Betamax. And that is one of the options here. So you could choose that and search for it. Not highly useful most of the time, but definitely something to be aware of, because that one time you need it, it'll be nice to know it's there. The bib level, this is pulled from the '07 leader field in the MARC record. And this is probably the least useful one. You can definitely look for serials this way. But other than that, most of these are not terribly useful. So overall, you really probably will not be using this one a whole lot. If anybody disagrees and says they use this all the time, I'd be very curious to know what you found it useful for. Literary form, on the other hand, can be really useful because this is where you can differentiate between fiction and nonfiction. So you could search for example, sharks, and you could search for that within fiction. Do I have anything else applied that would be weird? I don't think so. I have a bad habit of when I'm doing these searches to accidentally still be looking for Braille when I'm doing one of these others. And so this brings up specifically items that are classified as fiction with this very broad search term that otherwise would probably bring in a lot of other things. So, if I took this off, my 376 results probably going to go up to a higher number. Yeah, we went up to almost 2,000 by just removing that. So if you have one of those, you have a kid come in and say that they want to read stories about sharks and they really mean stories, they're looking for fiction, this is a way that you can do that search for them. And then our final one is the shelving location. And what this does, because of course you know that shelving locations are not connected to the bib record in NC Cardinal. Instead, they're set at each individual library that owns a copy of that. This is basically looking to see, does any library have a copy in this specific shelving location? And if it does, it's going to come up on this this search. So even if your library doesn't put something in that section, another library might. So this can be a useful way to differentiate YA or juvenile materials Can also be useful for things like, if you're specifically looking for biographies and your library does not pull those out separately, you could do your search looking for the biography shelving location, and things that other libraries have are going to come up. So there's some things that you can do with the shelving location filter. So that is what I had to say about filters. Are there any questions about adding filters? All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about sorting our results. And to do that, I'm going to hide my filters here just by clicking this hide filter button. And let's do, this is actually a pretty broad search. I want to do a broad search. So that's what we're going to do here. Um, so at this point, when I conduct a search, I have, a fairly large number of results. I have some different options in how I actually kind of deal with those results. So I can just go through and look at all 2,000 of these page by page, or I can come up here and I can change these results a little bit. The first thing I can do is change how they're sorted. The default is to sort by relevance, and Evergreen uses kind of a lot of different factors to determine what's the most relevant. I can change that by saying, let's sort by title. And that's going to give me a different order of the same materials. So, if I'm looking for a specific item and the title starts with Z, I can just go ahead and say, let's sort title Z to A and jump right to the end of the alphabet, and I'm going to get there faster. Now, I can also limit to available. So currently I'm seeing records for everything that fits my search, whether it's available to be checked out or not. So even if materials are lost or missing or just checked out, they're going to show up in these results. If I want to remove that so that I'm only seeing what's on the shelf right now, I can do that. So that's especially helpful when you've got a patron in front of you at the desk saying, I want to check out something today. Then you can limit to available at your library and you can see what's actually going to be out there on the shelf right off the bat. So if I redo my search to limited to available, lost about 1,000, or no, I'm sorry, about 100 items in that. So there are about 100 items in that initial search that that don't have a single copy that's in a currently available state. Now, another thing I can do, and this one's kind of cool, is that I can group formats and editions. So currently, I'm going to go back to a slightly different search that's going to give me a little bit more that I can work with in terms of formats and editions. So if I am looking to group formats and editions, currently, if I'm going through here, I see that I have books, lots of books, large print books, CD audio books. Somewhere in here, there's probably a DVD. Now, if I wanted to sort of see everything that we have under a specific title in one place, I can choose group formats and editions. And when I redo my search this way, you can see I went, let's see, the second one is a good example of this. This is going to take everything that's the same title, basically refers to the same content, and lump it together in one space in my results list. So basically, I can see that we've got the book, the e-audio, the large print, the ebook, and the CD audiobook of the Titan's Curse. So, if I have a patron come up and say, I really need this for school, don't care that much what format it's in, but I need it by tomorrow, I can see all of these different ways that the patron could interact with this material and then help them find what's easiest for them. I can even put holds on all of these at once. Whatever comes in first comes in first. I'm not going to get place a hold and then get the book and the large print and the CD audiobook. I'll get whichever one of these comes in to fulfill that hold first. So, there's a lot you can do when you do those grouping formats. The other thing that you can do with your results is that, let's come back up here and let's make our search that version where if the preferred library and the searching library are the same, you get a limited view of what's available. If I do this, and so I'm seeing Alexander, Maine, and then I click results from all libraries, then I'm actually going to start to see everything. So earlier I said, be aware that if you have your default and your preferred library are the same, you're not going to see things from outside that library. This is the way you can turn that off without resetting your preferences, is by clicking this button here. You still have to redo your search, but you can do that in that kind of um, from the search screen. Now, once you're actually in the bib record, you have to go back to your search in order to do it. But this gets you halfway there. So that is sorting your results. Any questions about that? Well, then let's briefly talk about facets. Facets allow you to take an existing search and grow from it using authority records. So if I look at my search results and I look over here in the left-hand side, I see all of these hyperlinks. I see one for personal author, for corporate author, for topic subject, and for genre, as well as series title. So the things that I can do here are basically say, patron wanted stuff about Greek mythology. We started with Percy Jackson. They found what they need here. Let's see what else we can find. We can come down here to the topic subject and choose mythology, Greek. And we can redo a search within that specific subject term. That might not have been a great one because we're doing Percy Jackson. It's all going to be that. So I didn't really limit it much. But let's see. If instead we said, let's look at very specifically within Percy Jackson, the Camp Half-Blood Chronicles, then we can reduce our search results even further by looking at that specific kind of sub-series within the larger umbrella of Percy Jackson. So you can use these to limit your search further by specific things such as the author or a subject term. So let's say, in fact, let's go back to our Batman search. And rather than just staying here with 1,300 different results, let's say that I'm very specifically looking for DC comic versions of Batman. So I don't want to see, National Geographic's Batman books or anything like that. I don't want to see the movies. I just want to see the actual DC comics. I can click on that and that takes me down to 97 results. And anytime where DC comic is listed as one of the authors of the material, that record's going to show up. And that brings us to 2:59 and to the end of my presentation. So I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes if there are questions. If there are questions right now, please feel free to go ahead and ask them. If you are unable to stay to ask a question, but you have some, please feel free to send them my way and I'd be happy to answer them via email or Basecamp. So Lydia asked about using the same search parameters for book club selections. I guess I don't know exactly what you mean. When you're searching for a book club, using the same parameters that we used, that you would use for a regular, for just an individual patron search, or are you talking about, maybe your book club once within a specific genre or something like that? And thank you to everyone who was here. I know a lot of you will probably have to leave right in the hour, and so I appreciate you being here. And if you do have questions, please feel free to send them my way. Okay, so book club selections for a specific genre and title. I mean, you can do searches for genre. It's a little trickier. What basically you'd go under subject term. And I think the subject term also searches the field where the genre is set. So you could search for, oh gosh, I can't think of how a genre, I mean, I could try romance, but that's going to be really huge. What you might be better off for when trying to do sort of a genre search is actually to do the shelf browse and to browse by putting the name of the genre. So if I did mystery here, hold on, it's got to finish that last one. I'm going to go away from it so it doesn't. Oh. So if I go to shelf browse and I put in mystery, this isn't perfect, but this will bring up anything that has mystery included in the call number. So any library that sort of that does like a prefix, a genre prefix for their materials, those will come up even if your library doesn't use a genre prefix. And so that can help you kind of limit. But genre searches are tricky. I'd be happy to look into that and see if I can come up with some better ways to do this. They're so big and so broad. You might be honestly, you're probably be better off doing sort of general Google searches for, materials for book clubs that like this specific genre and finding a few titles and then seeing if we have them. Which probably isn't the answer I'm supposed to give, but that's how I would do it. But I'll continue to explore some different options for searching by genre. Any other questions? Good. I'm glad you learned something new today. That is my basic goal with phase. If you do have other questions, let me know and I will see if I can come up with a better idea for genre and I'll send it to you if I do. Well, if there are no other questions, then I will go ahead and close out the webinar, but I do encourage you to reach out if you come up with anything. I hope to see you at future webinars, either within this kind of Evergreen Basics series or within any other areas of interest for you. So thanks for being here.